to sous vide well is a thing of beauty. We can achieve textures and flavors that we might not be able to achieve without sous vide. If you're just tying it up and throwing it over the fire, that's rudimentary. But even then, you're using the fire as a tool and as a technique to cook. So cooking is to manipulate. It's just understanding how you want your manipulations to go.
We're here with Hari at the Star Chefs International Congress. He had a great workshop yesterday. He put on an amazing tasting pop-up at the Steelite booth with some really good sous vide food and a wide variety of really unique stuff. So I'm really excited to have him on the Exploring Sous Vide show.
Man, I love sous vide. It really works in our kitchen. To sous vide well is a thing of beauty. We can achieve textures and flavors that we might not be able to achieve without sous vide. So it is a great tool in the arsenal.
And one thing I always like to ask is, what's it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Yeah. So I have a 17-day-old newborn baby at home, and I have a 4-year-old boy, and my wife is wonderful. When I cook, I like to keep things simple at home. Of course, I own pasta restaurants, so my son really likes pasta. So we'll make cacio e pepe. We'll make some really simple dishes. I also have a home pizza oven. He and I have pizza parties. I'll take things, I'll roast vegetables in it. Every Sunday, I turn into Francis Malman. He just signed the book for myself and my sous chef here at Star Chefs. And so I get a cigar and I light a fire outside. I cook on my grill. I cook in my wood-fired pizza oven. I just enjoy outside. I cook so much in a restaurant. It's just nice to be outside sometimes.
So you're a chef now. How did you first get into using sous vide?
Yeah, so it was the end of 2003. And I entered into a Viking cooking competition. I won the cooking competition and they gave me $2,000, which is a huge amount of money for a young cook like myself. They also gave me all these beautiful Viking cookware pans. Which at the time, they were like 3 or 4 pans that were worth like $700. I was like, wow, this is like the best prize ever. So I took that $2,000 and I bought the original scientific polyscience circulator. I was looking at things that were happening around the world, but of course nobody in Delaware had it or thought about it long before it was inexpensive or in the common vernacular or, in common eyesight. So it was something that I understood. I understood that if we can control the time and temperature of our poaching, then we can control texture and flavor. It's about understanding what you want your desired outcome to be, and then thinking about the ingredients and then working backwards to that desired result. Things that we couldn't do, medium rare short ribs. Something that's like such this tough cut of meat. Or the dish that I served the other day was sous vide braised lamb neck. The lamb neck itself is a very well-used muscle. I really like lamb necks because they have a really great meat to bone ratio, and it's a well-used muscle, so it has a lot of flavor. But traditionally you have to braise it. Braising is 3.5 hours at 350 degrees, lower or higher, give or take, depending on what you're trying to do. Where for us, we could actually take it, debone the lamb necks. Then what we could do is we could Maillard reaction, sear, caramelize them really hard. We wanted something that was similar to a traditional braised product, but we really wanted it to braise in its own juices and really concentrate the flavor and aroma in the bag. So we went with about 162 for about 12 hours. And what that did was it made it so that it wasn't fall apart, but it was braised. If you were to go longer at that temperature, that would be fine too. You could go 24 hours would be fine. You could go 18 hours, but after 12, it starts to really break down and get tender. And it was a great cut of meat and a great dish. So after I won that competition, I took that $2,000 and bought a circulator. So the next thing it's like, oh no, how do I get a chamber vat now? It's every young cook's dilemma. I was fortunate enough that the restaurant that I was cooking at had it was a butcher shop, a meat packer right next door. So those guys saw me all the time. Like, hey guys, can you vac this? Other things that I like to cook with sous vide, I think that if we think about it as the best poacher, we think about the way that we can get really controlled poaching. That's the way to use it. So poached fish can be very nice. You have to be careful because sometimes enzymatic response, the fish can break down too much. It can be tender, over, undercooked, so you really have to know where you're going with it. There's a lot of great applications.
So as a chef, tons of different ways to cook pretty much everything.
Yeah.
What's something that once you tried it sous vide, you're like, if I have the choice, this is the way that I'm going to always cook it in the future?
Of course, the 163-degree egg, the onsen egg, like when the Japanese were doing it, they had beautiful hot springs. They could just take their eggs and throw them in the hot springs with that circulating water over the hot springs. For us, I don't have a hot spring in my kitchen. So when you cook an egg in sous vide, you can achieve a lot of different textures. And I can just remember at brunch, you're the low man on the totem pole. You wake up on Sunday and you have to work brunch, and you're like, man, I have to hand poach all of these eggs, and then like you're storing them, and so this allows you can poach an egg in a shell, drop a couple of them, keep them hot. We take the eggs, we crack them into warm vinegar water so that they season. It gets a little bit of the outer albumin and things off, and we use a nice slotted spoon, and your eggs Benedict, crab Benedict, whatever Benedict you want, it really works. So it's a great technique to get that beautiful soft, all of the protein denatures at the same rate, and you have beautiful texture throughout.
What temperature you said that was again?
The traditional onsen egg, that's a 63 degrees, it's like 147.7, and then you can go higher. You could go to 150, 152 if you want a harder poached egg. If you over poach, it'll start to break down in that way. Other things we do is we can take all of the egg yolks, whisk the egg yolks, and cook them into egg yolk fudge or egg yolk fluid gel, where we just use egg yolks that are cooked as a texture and as a flavor of just pure egg. And the sky's the limit when you understand where you want to go and when you use the technique and technology right.
At the Steelite pop-up last year, there's a beef tartare, but they did the egg yolk. They took it out, separated it, cooked it sous vide into like a custardy sauce and used that on the top. I'd never had anything like that before.
Yeah. Sometimes we like to actually sous vide our tartares. With certain things that you can do is you can do long-term pasteurization. So if somebody is pregnant or immune compromised, and what we'll do is we'll cook a tartare till just enough so that the meat starts to firm. There are times and tables that you can look at for that if you're trying to pasteurize food.
I've done pasteurized eggs before, and they still act like raw eggs generally, and make some cookie dough that you can serve at parties, and it's safe to eat raw cookie dough. Who doesn't want
raw cookie dough? It's awesome. So, some savory chefs don't like pastry, and some pastry chefs don't like savory. To me, ingredients are ingredients. If I can master sugar, I can master cooking. If I can master technique, I can master cooking. So, but some of the things that you can do with, again, looking at the egg and looking at ice cream bases, looking at creme anglaces, there's a lot of pastry technique where it's, somebody's like, is that cheating? Is that making it too easy? And it's like, no, you still need to use really great ingredients. You still need to know the time and temperature you need to use. And you need to know what you're doing. And you need to also spin your ice cream so it doesn't have ice crystals, or you're not over or under spinning it. You need to make sure you look through your refractometer, make sure you have the right bricks, the right amount of fat, maybe a stabilizer, maybe not a stabilizer. But there are things that if I can make an ice cream, I've never made a scrambled egg creme anglaise since sous vide, so it's a great way to cook.
And I feel like when people ask, like, is this cheating or not, like, it's all cheating if you're not basically cooking on a rock on open fire.
Right.
Everything is designed to make it simpler.
Correct. I like when you hear Nathan Myhrvold speak about it, and he said, so I like the traditional food. I like bread and wine and cheese, things that aren't messed with, and those are some of the messed with foods that, you need bacteria, you need salt, you need age, you need yeast to leaven, you need wine that is fermented and clarified and all these fining agents and things. So, yeah, you're right. The cavemen, if you're just tying it up and throwing it over the fire, that's rudimentary. But even then, you're using the fire as a tool and as a technique to cook. So cooking is to manipulate. It's just understanding how you want your manipulations to go.
What's something that you've tried sous vide, you might have experimented with it, but you're like, the traditional method is still, I can't beat it?
So for some instances, I feel as though sous vide chicken, it doesn't have that same snap and that same kind of texture that I'm looking for. I really like fire roasting chicken. I like to cook it in my pizza oven over a live flame. When you sous vide, you can take the skin off and you can crisp the skin up later, but you're not going to get that beautiful golden caramel crispy skin that's covering it. It just doesn't work that way. You can make it successful, but I also just think that it's not necessarily my favorite way to cook it.
I was really impressed by your oyster dish and using sous vide to plump it up. Can you talk a little bit about the process you use there?
We do that often. It's one of these things where we wanted the oyster to be firmer. We wanted it to be plump. We wanted it to set up in the tart, and we wanted to give it a little bit more texture. So when we sous vide the oyster, we cooked it at 120 for about 20 minutes. And what we wanted to achieve was a little bit more plumpness, a little more firmness in the oyster. We wanted to still eat like a raw oyster or have that much moisture and that much succulence, but we just wanted to give it a little bit of texture.
How have you found the process of expanding your restaurants? You've grown, added more restaurants. Can you talk a little bit about your restaurants if people want to try some of your great food, and also where you're moving with them?
So I have a restaurant which on Mother's Day will be in business 8 years. I had a 10-year dream to open a restaurant before I was 30 and made it happen when I was 29, and the rest is history. At that restaurant, it's seasonal, regional, mid-Atlantic food. So we're inspired by technique, we're inspired by farmers. It's called a Muse, it's in Rehoboth Beach. Also, I have fast casuals. We're about to open another in a brewery. It's going to be called Grandpa's Kitchen. At that space, we use less sous vide, but we do use CVAP ovens. CVAP ovens are bagless. They're that controlled vapor. And that's, to me, is like if you're using good technology and you're being smart about it, whether it be a combi oven, a CVAP oven, sous vide, a really good induction burner, it's really about controlling your time and temperature. So at that restaurant, we do a lot of things where we'll take our sauces and reheat them at the perfect temperature with the right amount of steam. And that restaurant's very pasta focused. I have an extruder that makes 90 pounds of fresh pasta an hour. We have one that's 18 pound, that's gluten free, that makes 18 pounds an hour, and that makes 30 pounds, and a couple others. And we say, you go in, you say, I want that sauce, that pasta, and that's called Grandpa Mac. It was named after my great-grandfather. In the wintertime, I do a lot of consulting everywhere. I work with a lot of chefs. I work with a lot of companies, people. I love to develop content, and I love creating great food. So.
At your pop-up, you talked a lot about that you tried to typify kind of Delaware cuisine.
Yes.
What does Delaware cuisine mean to you, and how are you trying to embrace that as something that a lot of people, I think, outside of Delaware probably aren't familiar with at all?
Yeah, so Delaware is a very small state. It's the only state that has more chicken than people. It's a state which is centrally located in the Mid-Atlantic region. When we look at Delaware history, we're very quickly and closely looking at New Jersey, which is very close. You can take a ferry there. Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Our history from the beginning of the country was one where Delaware was a drive-through state. It was a hub. But we have beautiful agriculture to one side of the state, and we have beautiful sea, the ocean to the other side. So Delaware is also has some really old rural pockets in it. It has some really nice modern pockets as well, and that's kind of what we want to capture about our food and about Delaware. We want our food to be grounded in the Mid-Atlantic, grounded in American food, or what American food means to us. But the thing about American food is we're such a young country that America is the great melting pot. Unless you're a Native American, you came from somewhere, your family brought your culture. I think we're starting to now embrace and rediscover everybody's cultures. The best thing since sliced bread wasn't the best thing for food. The Industrial Revolution, TV dinners are great. TV dinners are one of these things where you can, pop it in, but it wasn't the best thing for real food. So, when I look at these really old cookbooks, the 1812 White House cookbook, they were cooking with real ingredients. They had salsa fee, they had potatoes and oysters, and they were using every part of the animal. And they were using a little more butter and flour, and some of the recipes are a little clunky, but it's interesting to me. I'll take an old recipe, it'll say, use a coffee cup of this or a nutmeg of this, or and it's like I look at those flavor profiles, I look at their ratios, and then I can modernize those recipes with what we understand today. And so we do some of that. Sometimes we look at things that are globally inspired with technique and fermentation, and sometimes we just look to our backyard. So.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing a lot of your knowledge, and I think if anyone is within driving distance, the restaurants, they should come check them out.
So I think social media is great because it's social. If you have any questions, follow me on Instagram on Haricam, HARICAM. DM me. I'll surely answer. If there's a problem, let's solve it together. There are no cooking secrets. Everything builds on everything else. I might want to learn from you, or you might want to learn from me. So that's the best thing about cooking and the sharing of knowledge. So yeah, check me out on Instagram. Go on my Instagram page. It's really, it's not for my businesses. It's for myself. It's for when you see a picture of my son, or a picture of my pizza oven, or a brand that I'm representing, or I also have a Grandpa Mac Instagram page and a Muse Instagram page for a Muse Rabbit. And I also manage other Instagrams, but my personal one is selfishly for me, and it's a blog so that 5 years from now, I can look back on some of the interesting things I was cooking. So,
awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Really
Thanks
appreciate
again.
it.